Imagine this for a second. Your country finds oil, like massive amounts of oil.
Yeah.
Game-changing.
You'd think so. Jackpot time.
Exactly. That's the first thought, isn't it? Prosperity's here. But what if it's not quite like that? What if finding oil specifically often turns out to be, well, the opposite of a blessing?
It's this really strange paradox. We've seen it again and again across the world. You get this abundance of natural resources, but instead of wealth and stability,
Yeah.
you end up with economic problems, sometimes stagnation, loads of corruption, even serious conflict. It's actually
Wow.
got a name, the resource curse.
And that resource curse is exactly what we're getting into today. We've gathered a whole lot of source material to really unpack why this happens.
Mm,
The idea here is to give you a kind of shortcut, get you properly informed on this whole thing, which can seem backwards at first glance.
right. Because it's counterintuitive.
Totally. So we'll look at what other countries went through, the lessons learned, and crucially, what steps are needed to, well, not end up as another sad story.
It really makes you think.
It does, and it brings up that big question for you listening right now. If your country found oil, would it actually be good news for you personally or something else?
Yeah. That's
Wow.
where it gets interesting.
So let's start with some of those stories, these examples like Venezuela. They really show this illusion of instant wealth, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Venezuela is, it's a tragic case study. Huge oil reserves, just massive. But the country itself, economic collapse, social crisis.
And the sources point to where the money went,
They
right?
do. It seems the oil revenue was overwhelmingly channeled to the government, to the ruling party, not really spread out to benefit the population as a whole.
And the results. We know them, but spell them out.
Well, you saw hyperinflation just skyrocket. The money became almost, worthless.
Yeah.
Then massive food shortages, which led to terrible malnutrition problems. And of course, huge numbers of people just leaving the country. Billions.
It's a really stark reminder that just having the oil in the ground doesn't automatically mean prosperity, not if it's not managed well or
Right.
transparently.
Exactly. And then you have Nigeria, another really telling example.
Africa's biggest oil producer, right?
That's the one. Huge oil wealth on paper. But what's the reality for many people there? Our sources show that basic things like reliable electricity, clean water, they're still out of reach for so many.
So where does the money go?
Well, materials point very strongly towards systemic corruption.
Mhm.
Leaders diverting funds, money meant for infrastructure, just vanishing.
And it's not just the money, is it? There are other consequences.
No, definitely not. You've got severe environmental damage, particularly in the oil-producing regions like the Niger Delta, pollution, conflict over resources, ongoing strife. It fuels instability rather than preventing it.
Okay, so Venezuela, Nigeria. What about newer players like South Sudan?
South Sudan is another really tragic one.
Yeah.
A relatively new nation finds oil, and what happens almost immediately? Ethnic warfare, yeah. The sources we looked at suggest the oil discovery itself became a trigger. Different groups fighting for control of the oil money. Over 1 million people displaced. The government barely functioning. It's chaos.
It feels like the oil just poured gasoline on existing problems.
That's a good way to put it. It can act as a powerful accelerant for existing tensions, existing weaknesses in a country.
And this isn't unique to them. Think about Libya, Iraq.
Right, both countries with significant oil reserves, but both absolutely torn apart by political conflict, foreign intervention.
Decades of turmoil.
Exactly. Their oil wealth didn't save them. You could even argue it made them more of a target or worsened the internal fighting over who controls that wealth.
So when you step back and look at these stories, Venezuela's collapse, Nigeria's paradox, South Sudan's war, Libya, Iraq, what's the pattern here? What's it telling us about oil wealth versus, actual national well-being?
I think the pattern points very clearly away from the oil itself being the problem. It's about the context. The resource curse seems to really take hold where the political system is already fragile.
Fragile how?
Well, maybe the Constitution isn't very clear or it's easily ignored. The rules for managing resources are murky. And, crucially, there's little or no real public oversight. People can't easily see what's happening with the money or hold leaders accountable.
So the ground is already fertile for problems before the oil arrives.
Precisely. The oil just adds huge stakes and huge amounts of money into an already unstable situation.
And our sources get specific about these vulnerabilities, don't they? Things that could potentially apply anywhere.
Yeah, they highlight things like political instability.
Right.
Governments changing constantly. One example mentioned was having like 8 different prime ministers in just 5 years.
Wow. How can you plan anything long-term with that kind of churn?
You really can't. And that instability creates huge economic risks. When political connections, not actual competence or fair bidding, decide who gets major contracts.
Like oil contracts or major infrastructure projects.
Exactly. You've got a recipe for corruption. The research specifically flags this danger. Oil money comes in, politicians announce grand 10-year plans or talk about foreign investment.
It sounds good on paper.
Right. But then the money just disappears.
Right.
Siphoned off, mismanaged, gone.
Okay, so putting this together, if a country doesn't have really solid foundations, strong constitutional principles, clear laws, real transparency, then finding oil, even with the best intentions, could easily lead it down that same path as Venezuela or these other examples.
That seems to be the core risk, yes. It raises that fundamental question. What does a country need to have in place before it starts pumping oil to make sure it's a benefit, not a curse?
Right. What are the prerequisites for actually getting this right?
Because without that foundation, the resource can absolutely become a liability. But the good news is there are strategies, there are safeguards countries can put in place.
Okay, let's talk solutions. What does the material say? First up.
Laws. Clear, comprehensive petroleum laws. You absolutely need a solid legal framework that covers exploration, extraction, revenue management, environmental protection, the whole 9 yards.
Makes sense. You can't just wing it with billions of dollars at stake.
Definitely not. And connected to that is the approval process itself. Getting licenses, permits. This needs to be clean, free from political meddling. Decisions based on technical facts and sound policy, not who you know.
So kicking the politicians out of the approval process as much as possible.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Keeping it objective. And that leads directly to transparency in contracts.
How so?
Well, the bidding process for who gets to extract the oil and the terms of those contracts, all of it needs to be open. Public. No secret deals, no hidden clauses that benefit a select few.
Sunlight being the best disinfectant.
Pretty much. Then there's the money itself. What do you do with potentially huge revenues pouring in?
Spend.
That's the temptation. But often, a really bad idea, especially if it's spent quickly or badly. What experts strongly recommend, and our sources highlight this, is setting up a sovereign wealth fund.
Okay, what's that exactly?
It's basically a state-owned investment fund. You take a significant portion of the oil revenue, you don't spend it immediately, but you save and invest it, often internationally.
Why internationally?
It helps insulate the money from domestic political pressures, from demands for immediate spending. It's about long-term stability, saving for future generations, and smoothing out the boom and bust cycles that often come with oil prices.
Smart. Investing for the long haul. What else?
Thinking about the local level is crucial. The communities where the drilling actually happens, where the pipelines run,
Sure.
they often face the direct negative impacts, like environmental disruption.
Yeah, they bear the immediate burden.
So it's vital that they see direct, tangible benefits, not just vague promises, but actual improvements in services, infrastructure, jobs, revenue sharing, something concrete.
Makes sense. They need to be partners, not just bystanders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But maybe the single most important factor, the one that underpins all the others, according to our sources,
Go on.
citizen awareness and engagement. Meaning an informed public that understands the stakes, knows what agreements are being made, and has the power and the will to hold their leaders accountable. If people are complacent or kept in the dark,
They risk getting cheated.
exactly, just like it's happened elsewhere. Without that civic vigilance, all the best laws and funds can potentially be undermined.
That really lands. It's not just about governments. It's about the people demanding better. There was that great line in the source material, almost funny.
The use our brains one.
Yeah, something like, oil has been found, great, but we also need to use our brains. It just cuts right through it. You need foresight, intelligence, planning.
Yeah.
Not just blind excitement.
It sums it up perfectly, because ultimately what we've pulled from all this reading is that oil or any big resource find isn't automatically good or bad. It's neutral.
Its impact depends on us.
Precisely. Whether it leads to prosperity or crisis really hinges entirely on how a nation acts collectively, on civic awareness, as we said, and critically, on the quality and integrity of its leadership.
The lessons from the past are just laid out so clearly, aren't they? We really have to learn from what happened in Venezuela, Nigeria, and elsewhere. We need to prepare now.
Proactively, yes. It's not about if you find a resource, maybe, but how you're set up to manage it wisely when or if you do.
So maybe the thought to leave everyone with is this.
Go for it.
Dream of oil, sure, but don't fall into the oil trap.
Well said.
Yeah.
Because that real sustainable wealth, it's not just buried underground. It's in our collective ability, our wisdom, to manage what we have responsibly.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.